We'll study from the study of the Sefirot with Rabash. We'll read from the book, Volume 2, Part 5, page 323 in the Hebrew version, item 39. So we're reading item 39. Let us return to the matter that when it returns to being not expanding in Keter, it is then expanding in Chokhmah, meaning the light departs from Keter and light of Chokhmah descends in it, in the vessel of Chokhmah. At that time, the 7 sons in Bina are grown and do not need their mother, meaning they have learned that Bina has phase 2 of clothing and phase 1 of hoarseness. At that time, Bina ascends to Chokhmah due to her desire to adhere to her. This is called not expanding in the light of Bina. It seems from here that it was not expanding in Keter, but expanding in Chokhmah. Then it became to not expanding in Bina. Then Bina connected with Chokhmah because she has a desire to adhere to her. This is called not expanding in the light of Bina. After that, the vessel of Bina turns her interior downwards, and the 7 lights in her descend, and all are given to Chesed face to face. So, what is the order here? We need to know what the meaning is. That Bina turned her interior downward and became face to face with the vessel of Chesed. We will see below inner light 39. Not expanding in Keter, it is then expanding in Chokhmah, and light of Chokhmah descends in it. This is because the coarseness of phase 3 of the female of Keter was refined once more. At that time, the vessel of Keter turns its interior downwards and becomes phase 3, phase 2 again. And Keter gives its residue once more, meaning phase 3, phase 2, to Chokhmah, to the vessel of Chokhmah, as before. It follows that the light of Chokhmah descends once more as in the beginning. Moving on. Then he says, the 7 sons of Bina are grown and do not need their mother. At that time, Bina ascends to Chokhmah, meaning after the light of Chokhmah descended to the vessel of Chokhmah, this illumination reaches Bina too. Why? For the above reason that Abba ve'Ima come out as one, meaning they emerge on a single phase of coarseness. Hence, they stay as one, meaning their level is equal. It's the same as above in the adjacent discourse in the section that begins with "and the light." This is very difficult. We will see soon. Since the illumination reached Bina, the light of it receives the light of Chesed too, phase one that exists in the vessel of Chokhmah. For this illumination of Chokhmah, and at that time it attains its phase of Gadlut, meaning the phase of Gal, of Vak, Gal of Zeranpin, Chokhmah for Zeranpin. He writes, then the 7 sons in Bina are grown and do not need their mother. Previously, when it was not expanding in Chokhmah, but expanding in Keter, so expanding in Bina, and Bina had phase 2 of clothing and phase 1 of coarseness. Phase 1 of coarseness cannot give him chesed. Why? They are called a baby that needs his mother for the light of chasadim, light that needs illumination of Chokhmah or illumination of Bina. Therefore, illumination of Chokhmah was not there because it was not expanding in Chokhmah. So they had to remain in Bina so that they would have at least the desire of chesed of the mother, as he says here. Unlike now, when it became not expanding in Keter and expanding in Chokhmah. Then the light of Chokhmah, which is phase 2, illuminates to Bina, which is on the same level, phase 2, let's say. Therefore, the sons, phase 1, who have Chokhmah, already have illumination of Chokhmah and can already go outside. To whom? To their place, phase 1, because it already has illumination of Chokhmah. But what's difficult for me is what he says. When I say expanding in Chokhmah, then expanding in Bina makes no sense. They both are on the same level. Where are they in the same level? It is phase 3, phase 2. Even if we say phase 2 and it's phase 2 of clothing, he tells us that it's not. They come out as one and stay as one, as the section says, and the light. Here it seems, why does he say that Abba the Ima come out as one and stay as one? So he says, why? Meaning they emerge on a single phase of coarseness. So we need to say that although we learned that the vessel of Chokhmah had its phase 3 refined, and the vessel of Chokhmah remained with phase 2 of clothing and phase 2 of coarseness. And there was a coupling there of phase 2. These two phases called male and female, and a new level emerged on phase 2. And we learned that this phase 2 of light is given to the vessel of Chokhmah, thus they are on the same level. But afterwards we learned that also phase 2 of Chokhmah was refined, and phase 1 remained. And this phase 1 is given to Bina. And Bina cannot give this phase 1 to Chesed because they are small. There is no Chokhmah there. Now, when we say expanding in Chokhmah, so what do we learn? That phase 2 has not yet been refined to phase 1. It seems from here that otherwise this would not be one level. So we have to say at the time when expanding in Chokhmah, even if we say there are 2 phases, there is Chokhmah illuminating to Bina, Chokhmah. So what is there in the vessel of Bina? The phase 1 that we had before, this phase 1 receives Chokhmah. How is it called face to face? This is a bit difficult. It could be that in this level that receives Chokhmah, Chokhmah is given to phase one that it has from before. So what does he add here? We need to see another passage soon. Here he says two things. Since now, expanding in Chokhmah, there is light of Chokhmah, the question arises, when is it not expanding in Chokhmah? It seems that as long as its phase two of coarseness was refined, there is still Chokhmah. Therefore, it illuminates to Binah, because the light of Binah that is in the vessel of Binah, the light of the male, is the light that emerged on the two phases that were in the vessel of Chokhmah. And this still remains to it. From this aspect, they are one level. But now that it became expanding in Chokhmah again, the light can illuminate now to Binah, unlike before. When Binah received phase one, it had to be previously not expanding in Chokhmah, meaning the phase two of the vessel of Chokhmah had to be refined. But now, phase one already exists in the vessel of Binah, so it doesn't need to be refined. Therefore, at the time when Chokhmah has two phases and has the light of Chokhmah, if the light of Chokhmah illuminates to all that is phase two in the vessel of Binah, and there is also their phase one of coarseness from before, then the seven sons, they receive Chokhmah. Then this Chokhmah that phase one has, called Gadlut, can already go outside. Now, what does it mean that Binah ascends to Chokhmah? Let's see. What? At that time, Binah ascends to Chokhmah. He writes, then the seven sons of Binah are grown and do not need their mother. For once they have attained illumination of Chokhmah, they have become grown since they have acquired the phase of force. This is why they do not need their mother. He explains to us that prior to that, when it was not expanding in Chokhmah, but only expanding in Binah alone, the Vak were the phase of light of Hasadim without any illumination of Chokhmah. Hence, they had to receive their sustenance from the vessel of Binah, which is in the phase of the desire of Chesed, which is the phase of Gar and of Atzmut, Chokhmah, two things. They could not separate the Vak from the vessel of Binah to the vessels of Vak because of the lack of sustenance. As there is no sustenance and Atzmut, self, except in the phase of Chokhmah, which is their place. However, now that they have attained illumination of Chokhmah, they have become grown and have a standing stature and the power to expand in the vessels. And this is no novelty here, as we learned before. Let's read forward.
At that time, Bina ascends to Chokhmah. Why? This is because then it is impossible for the upper one to bestow upon the lower one, except by turning the pnimi, the anterior, meaning to be in equivalence of form, to be in equivalence with the lower one, which is regarded as close to it, and giving it its residue. Thus, Bina ascends to Chokhmah, meaning the male and the female of Bina, we learned, is the light that emerged on two phases in the vessel of Chokhmah. And the Nukva of Bina, he explains before, is the record of phase two of clothing called female, because this is only a record compared to the light. It becomes refined, they become refined from their phase two to phase one. And now at Bina, phase one has become the face, the interior. By this, the vessel of Bina is found face to face with the vessel of Chesed, as they are now both with the coarseness of phase one, which is called face to face. It turns out then that the male and the female of the vessel of Bina depart and rise to the vessel of Chokhmah. Chokhmah and Bina are then found in one vessel of the phase of Chokhmah. And now there is the control of the vessel of Chokhmah in the Partzuf, as it's written. We have reached a state we will learn this, then we'll argue. That comes the expansion in Keter, phase 4, phase 3, regularly in the first stage, and not expanding in Chokhmah yet. Keter illuminates. How can Chokhmah emerge? And afterwards, we learned there was an internal a clash between the internal and surrounding light, as we learned, phase 4 over phase 3 in the vessel of Keter. Say it was refined. So what remains from the vessel of Keter? Phase 3 over phase 2. Another point we need to learn from this is like this. After the lights departed in the Partzuf of Galgalta, he says the order of the 10 vessels. In each vessel, there remains a record, and the last phase is lost. It comes out. Turns out that in the vessel of Keter, there is phase 4 over phase 3 there. Phase 4 was previously phase 4 of coarseness. Now there is phase 3 of coarseness, and phase 4 is only for clothing. And the vessel of Chokhmah, of Partzuf, of Galgalta remained. What was previously phase 3 became phase 2 of coarseness, and phase 3 is no more than clothing. And the level of Bina of Partzuf Galgalta had phase 2 of coarseness there, phase 1 of coarseness remains, and phase 2 remains only in clothing. What happens with phase 1? There also needs to be a descent. We'll see. He doesn't tell us. Up to here. First of all, let's understand what he says, and then we'll think about what he doesn't say. Afterwards, he says that a new coupling is made in the Rosh of the level of the degree through the screen of the Tabu of Galgalta that rose to the Rosh of Galgalta, and the light comes to bring out the records. Previously, Partzuf of Tamim emerged, called Vessel of Keter, on phase 4 over 3. Then afterwards, the vessel of Keter was refined from phase 4 over 3. What remained? Phase 3 over phase 2. This corresponds to the vessel of Chokhmah. And now the upper one gives to the lower one. It must be face to face. There must be equivalence. Therefore, it gave to the vessel of Chokhmah. Now it's phase 3. Phase 2 that has equivalence. And afterwards we learn that Chokhmah was refined and gave its illumination alone to Bina. Then he explains that phase 3 of clothing was refined and became phase 2 of clothing. And the illumination of phase 2 of clothing was given to the vessel of Bina. As we learned before, that from Bina remained phase 2 of clothing and phase 1 of coarseness. It gave it to phase 2. But phase 1, it still did not, hasn't given it to the vessel of Bina. Why? He doesn't say. And afterwards he says, what remains now in the vessel of Chokhmah, phase 2 of clothing, phase 2 of coarseness. A coupling was made there of these two phases called male and female, and a new level emerged on phase 2. This phase 2 was given to the vessel of Binah. But the difference is that for the upper one, there is Ga of this level, and in Binah, there's only Vak of this degree. On which degree? On phase 2. Since this is light, the Rav calls it by the name of light of the male. Unlike the record that is there, phase 2 of clothing, he calls it the female, the quality of female. I see another point. Since he says that the male, which is the light, he calls Vak, but the record that remains from the first expansion, he calls it Ga, except that the aspect of female is only a record. Therefore, he says that the male is the quality of Vak, and the female is the quality of Ga, but it's the quality of a female. Why did it happen this way? We'll see later. Afterwards, we learn that phase 2 of coarseness in the level of Chokhmah was refined to phase 1. Then he learns that, then he teaches that phase 2 and phase 3 rose together to the vessel of Keter, and they expanded in Keter. Why? Because not expanding in Chokhmah, then the record rose upward and received their light again, as it was before. We learn this, and we'll learn it again. It expands in the Keter, and not expanding in Chokhmah. The meaning of this is not expanding in Chokhmah. I'm learning now the vessel of Chokhmah. I'm teaching now in general way that the light of Keter that stands below Malchut of the Rosh of Galgalta, above Patzuf Ab, there is a vessel of Ab, the vessel of Keter rules. At the time when it has only phase 4 of clothing, lacking phase 4 of coarseness, only Vak of Chasadim, and not Chokhmah either. That's at the time when we say that it's not expanding in Chokhmah, that phase 3 over phase 2 was refined to phase 1. It gives to Bina, and they made an expansion there in Keter. It has such a state. But if we say that Bina also gives phase 1 to the vessel of Chesed, this cannot be, because the light of Chasadim, the light that needs the completeness of illumination of Chokhmah, as we learn in the Anpin of direct light, or if not yet, they still remain in Binah, called a baby that needs his mother. Therefore, Binah has not yet given the 7 sons phase 1 to the vessel of Chesed, and we finished one stage. Afterwards, it returns to the 3rd stage. Here we learned that there was stage 1 expanding in Keter, stage 2 not expanding in Keter, expanding in Chokhmah, 3rd stage now expanding in Keter. Perhaps expanding in Chokhmah or expanding in Bina, and Chesed, not yet.
נעבור לחלק הבא של השיעור, לימוד בין חברים.